It is a pilgrimage of penance. On a rare overseas trip, an aging pontiff hoping to right a historic wrong. Thousands of Indigenous people in Canada gathered on these sacred grounds.
The words you share with us will echo the true healing and real hope throughout many generations to come.
Many emotional, waiting for an apology more than 100 years in the making.
Pido perdón humildemente por el mal que tantos cristianos cometieron contra los pueblos indígenas.
Pope Francis pleading for forgiveness on the very soil where decades of harm unfolded in Canada's residential school system. Most of those schools operated by the Catholic Church.
La Iglesia se arrodilla ante Dios y le implora perdón.
But his words for many, just the beginning of their healing journey.
We lost a lot of kids over that, and we can't bring them back, right? It really hurts.
An apology today won't erase anything. The experience already happened.
The language that we were speaking was not allowed. And what belief that we had in spirituality was the superstition, was the work of the devil.
From the late 1880s through to the mid-1990s, officials say 150,000 children were forced to attend the schools. The aim to assimilate Indigenous children into white culture by stripping them of their heritage and their languages and separating them from their families. Some suffered abuse and others even died at the schools.
It was all about assimilation, Christianization, and basically redesigning human beings.
Dr. Marie Wilson helped chair Canada's historic Truth and Reconciliation Commission, which investigated the history of residential schools. A report released in 2015 labeling the schools a form of cultural genocide. As one of its 94 calls to action, the commission had called for the Pope to come to Canada and apologize.
It's a kind of long overdue fulfillment of something survivors have been asking for.
This trip, just the latest example of Pope Francis trying to focus the Catholic Church on issues important to him. From washing the feet of Muslim refugees to focusing the world's attention on climate change.
Climate change is a problem we can no longer be left to a future generation.
To being more welcoming of gay people.
Se una persona è gay e cerca il Signore e ha buona volontà, ma chi sono io per giudicarla?
Each move targeted in its purpose, and it's been no different here in Canada. The Pope's first stop was in Alberta, where most of Canada's residential schools were located. The Pope clasping his hands in prayer at an Indigenous cemetery in the community of Musqueam.
I wanted to be part of history. I wanted to witness this myself and to hear the Pope say that he is sorry.
Dr. Cora Voyager drove 4 hours to see Pope Francis. She went to a residential school at just 9 years old with her 2 sisters.
It was really a very lonely existence. You know, you're away from your family, you're away from everybody that loves you. You are placed in a quasi-militaristic environment. I mean, I've never been in jail, but I'm sure that if I were in jail, it would have been very much like being in residential school.
There were children who were punished physically or even emotionally for speaking their own language. Did you witness that during your time there as a 9-year-old?
I witnessed personally. The threat of violence was kind of always hanging in the air. People were walking around on eggshells because you just never knew when, you know, something was going to erupt.
For many, the trauma from those schools passed from generation to generation.
A survivor said, the only thing I learned in the residential school was how to hate myself.
Chief Tony Alexis leads the Alexis Nakota Sioux Nation.
There's people who are celebrating the fact that Pope Francis is here. And for them, you know, it's a connection with the leader of the church. And then there's some who are still feeling the pain and the agony of what has happened in residential schools and with the church. So for them, there's a hesitation. and there's a fear.
He wants to see some concrete steps taken by the church.
We want to see some action behind this trip, and not just lip service. It cannot be that way. It cannot be just a photo op. It has to be real work.
For many, the wounds from the residential school system were reopened last year when more than 1,000 graves of Indigenous children were discovered on the grounds of several schools.
It was like a ripple effect. It spread throughout the entire country. The people, the ones who went to residential school, the members, they started to talk about stories of how they were called out to help bury children.
The discovery prompting outrage in Canada and around the world.
The non-Indigenous community, they are now listening, and maybe it's only because of that this apology is happening.
The fury here in the United States too, where the legacy of Indian boarding schools still lingers. Nightline covered that history earlier this year.
I call the boarding school era one of America's best kept secrets. Boarding school and the legacy of boarding school has impacted every Native family.
Hundreds of thousands of Indigenous children were taken from their homes and put into boarding schools from the 1860s through to the 1960s. The schools in the U.S. were run by both the federal government and multiple Christian denominations.
It was a national policy to take Indian children, to beat their native language out of them, to remove them from their families so they wouldn't have that cultural teaching. It's that bad.
The United States Indian Industrial School in Carlisle, Pennsylvania, helped serve as a model for Canada's residential schools. Carlisle was founded by Civil War veteran Richard Pratt in 1879.
Captain Richard Pratt believed in the saying at the time, the only good Indian is a dead Indian. But he said, I rather purport to kill the Indian in him and save the man. They just saw these kids that they weren't even human. They saw them as savages.
The Department of the Interior recently launched an initiative to examine the boarding school era, but no formal Truth and Reconciliation Commission has ever been formed by the government. The Pope did not apologize for the church's role in Indian boarding schools in the U.S. His visit to Canada comes after meetings earlier in the spring with Indigenous leaders at the Vatican. The trip even more momentous given the Pope's health. The 85-year-old has suffered from painful sciatica, and recent knee problems have made walking and standing more difficult, forcing the Vatican to cancel some events and trips. At a mass today in an Edmonton stadium, his perseverance on display. But despite the historic visit, many believe more needs to be done.
The Pope apologized.
Yes.
Was it enough?
I was really happy with what he said, that it seemed that it was a very sincere and fulsome apology. If there is only one part that I wish he would have gone further on and would have mentioned sexual abuse of the children in residential school, because that was not mentioned.
Survivors demanding more details about the investigation the Pope has called for and asking for the church to open its archive. Still, the Pope taking another step in the road to forgiveness, joining in a pilgrimage on Lac St. Anne, known for its healing waters.
Healing is not only us. It's not only the Indigenous community that has to heal. It has to be the church as well. Healing has to come on both sides.
Hi everyone, George Stephanopoulos here. Thanks for checking out the ABC News YouTube channel. If you'd like to get more videos, show highlights, and watch live event coverage, click on the right over here to subscribe to our channel, and don't forget to download the ABC News app for breaking news alerts. Thanks for watching.